Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So in 4 minutes, we'll be starting our session then. Yogesh, are we going to start the session now?
Hello, Ankita. Can we wait a minute? Like around
Yes, yes, loud and clear.
3:32, can we start?
Okay, so we'll wait for 2 minutes. Then please say start and then I'll start. Thank you.
Ankita, we should start.
Sure, Yogesh. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all for this digital session, which is co-organized by EBTC, European Business Technology Center, with the Chamber of Marathwada Industries and Agriculture, Magic, of course, with CII platform, and TMIH, along with our experts from Sagacious IP. This session basically will revolve around on sharing valuable insights around the importance of patent monetization. Because of course, whenever we get the patent or there is a technology around it, basic objective of creating it basically to bring it to market and monetization, of course. Hence, this session would highlight upon different strategies about how to monetize and what should be do's and don'ts around it, and what would be the risk involved if you're choosing the best route, whether you want to license it or you want to practice yourself, or you want to distribute through different partners with the royalties. My name is Ankita Tyagi. I'm Deputy Head IP Projects at EBTC, and I'll be your moderator throughout this session. And once again, welcome for this next season of Thursday Talks, which is Thursday Talks 2.0. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Ashish Gardeji, Founder Director Magic, and Dr. Vinita Gaikwad, Director of TMIH, for their opening remarks. Gardeji, over to you, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. On behalf of Magic and all other organizing partners, I welcome you for this second edition of Thursday Talk series, wherein we would be inviting eminent speakers to deliver information and share a lot of insights connected with innovation and startups. Just to give you a quick overview of Magic. Magic is a Section 8 company, business incubator, SME accelerator, which is based at Aurangabad, and it's a sector agnostic incubator and SME accelerator. We are catering to startups, as well as we are supporting MSMEs in accelerating their growth. This particular session and this initiative is part of Magic's CSI partnership with Tata Technologies Limited and CII for hosting this session. And today we have a reputed college from Mumbai and Dr. Vinita Gaikwad is amongst us, along with their faculty members and students. And I'm sure this particular session will be useful for all the attendees who are participating and attending this session from various parts of country. So I won't take much of time, and I hand over the mic to Ankita once again.
Thank you, Ashish ji. And I'd like to invite Dr. Vinita for her opening remarks, please.
Sorry to share, Ankita. She is facing some network issue. So I hope we can continue the session.
Definitely, definitely. So I think without any ado, and let's invite our expert, Hani Mago, Group Manager, ICT Licensing and Litigation Team at Sagacious IP. He has 12-year plus experience in a wide spectrum of domains, which includes IP services, on patent monetization, of course, on licensing and analytics and searching. So welcome to Hani. Hani, please, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Ankita. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Uh, Ankita has already given a brief introduction about me, but I'll probably just give my introduction again. Hi, everyone. My name is Hani Mago. I am an electronics engineer by education. I have more than 12 years of experience in the field of intellectual property, and over these 12 years, I have had the opportunity to work on a wide spectrum of IP services, which includes patent analytics, patent monetization, patent searching, etc. And the focus of today's discussion obviously is going to be on patent monetization, right? And which I believe is the most prominent service that any of the companies today cater to. I mean, at least 60 to 70% of the work, for example, that we at Sagacious do is related to patent monetization. So it's great to be here.
Sure. Thanks, Mani, for setting up the context, of course. And before we'll move ahead, I'd like to even invite our listeners to keep sharing their thoughts and their questions due course of time, and even in the question box on the right side of the presentation window. And let's get started now. So, Hani, first question is gonna be, of course, regarding the best ways to monetize patents. But in this, I would like to request you that please share your experience, I mean, with your different clients, what's their notion about monetizing the patents with the different stakeholders, because startups, SMEs, of course, big companies or the research institutes, the needs would be different, right? Whenever they're creating technologies and whenever they are asking for the monetization, and what's their expectation. So please, Annie.
Right. So again, patent monetization, again, to start with, I mean, all of us, I'm sure who are attending this understand what a patent is. It's an intangible asset that gives us the right over a certain innovation that we have done, right? And getting a patent obviously is a time-consuming process. It takes a lot of time, effort, money, etc. And so once a patent is granted, I mean, it is imperative that we find ways to make money out of it. That's where patent monetization essentially comes into picture, right? When we talk about different ways of monetizing patent, there are primarily three ways, if I may say, in which one can think of monetizing their IP. I'll probably also go ahead and share my screen. Just give me a second. Yeah. So like I was saying, patent monetization is essentially coming up with ways in which you can make money out of the patent that has been granted to you, right? Now, the three most common ways in which one can make money out of it. The first one is manufacturing a product based on the technology. I mean, this is something that a lot of companies, specifically in the automotive space, I would say that we have experienced do. They primarily file patents uh, which cover the various product features that they themselves launch, right? So, I mean, that's primarily their way of making money out of patents is by manufacturing the products, right? But again, as one can imagine, manufacturing a product requires a lot of R&D. A lot of resources are required. A lot of money is required, for example, to manufacture the product first, and then obviously, I mean, it all depends on how well will that product be received by the market, which really dictates how much money you will eventually end up earning out of the patents and the products that you've made based on the patents, right? So that's where I mean, especially a lot of the companies which come to us, we work at Sagacious, we work with lots of corporates, right? So these corporates again have no dearth of money, etc. So these are the companies that do manufacture their own products, etc., based on the patents as well. But in the last 5 odd years, what we have seen is that there's been a huge uptick on the patent licensing side of things, right? Which is the second most advised route to make money out of the patents, right? So when we talk of patent licensing, what we are essentially saying is that, let's say if I have a patent, right, but I do not have the requisite resources to manufacture the product out of it. Now, what I'll start doing is I'll try and look out for a company that can make use of my invention and make products out of it. And the way I get benefited is that for every, typically that's the arrangement that we have seen, for every product that gets sold by that company, I get a certain percentage out of it, which is typically called royalty rate, right? It usually hovers between 5 to 20%. So if, let's say, a product gets sold for 100 rupees, I may get 5 rupees, ranging from 5 rupees to 20 rupees out of it, right? So that's in a nutshell what patent licensing it is. Here, I mean, again, the advantage of patent licensing is that the patent owner, the one who has filed the patent, continues to be the owner of it, right? It's just that you're delegating the rights to someone else to manufacture products based on your invention, right? And again, as I already mentioned, you get benefited out of the products that are sold by the potential whosoever you've entered the licensing agreement with, right? And the third way of earning money out of patents is obviously by selling the patents, right? Here, it's like if I were to, for example, compare between licensing and selling, let's say one of the analogies that comes to my mind is, let's say you have a house, right? Now, if you want to make money out of that house, there are 2 ways in which you can do it. You can either sell off that property, right? And what you'll get in return is that a lump sum money, right? A one-time lump sum money, which you will get from the buyer. Or you can rent it out, in which what essentially is happening now is that there's a recurring source of income that you have. You get paid rent on a monthly basis, for example, right? Now, that renting mode mode of operation here basically corresponds to licensing. So in licensing as well, generally the money that the licensor gets is on a recurring basis, right? Which could be yearly or bi-yearly. I mean, again, it depends on the kind of agreement that you've signed with the licensee.
Okay, Honey, I have a question around it. So the 3 ways you have mentioned, but tell me the scenario, because nowadays a lot of time joint ownership will be there, right?
Right.
So in a lot of government even policies or the tenders, they have mentioned that specifically Indian owner should be there in IP, right? So let's say if one part of IP is already with the one European or might be a partner in any other country except India, okay? They came to India and they have worked within joint ownership with Indian partner. Okay, might be in the process they have licensed their technology to Indian partner. Okay, and now the scenario is that they have jointly created new upgraded technology. So how they should go ahead, because I'm sure there are a lot of issues and challenges around it will be there. So I mean, even the percentage you have mentioned, 5%, or is it gonna be the same, or is it based on the market scenario? What would be the market of that particular technology? Based on that, they decide what's the situation.
I mean, again, if I were to answer the second part of it, the royalty percentage part of it, it mainly depends on, again, the kind of technology or the problem rather that the patent is trying to solve. If, for example, let's say the invention relates to it's solving a problem that is very much prevalent in the market, and you as a patent owner believe that that there would be a lot of takers for this technology, and there would be lots of companies that would be willing to manufacture products around of it, right? Now, if in such a scenario, obviously you are in a situation where you can ask for a premium. You may tell a company that, hey, I'm willing to share, I mean, make you a licensee, but I want this much in return. And if the technology is compelling enough, I mean, they have every reason to give you what you need. So it essentially gets dictated by the underlying technology that you've patented, right? And coming to the first part of your question where you talked about joint ownerships, right? That's always a tricky situation to be in. I mean, when you have multiple assignees or multiple inventors that have created one invention, I mean, before you even go ahead with licensing, it is very, very important that all those parties are on the same page. A lot of times we have seen that uh, they they may not be on the same page in terms of deciding whether to, for example, go ahead with licensing, or should we go ahead with selling, or what should we do about it. So when it's always good to have, uh, I mean, sole ownership to a patent, but I mean, we've all seen situations, especially in case of universities, we've seen that uh, generally there's a university and let's say sometimes a corporate who are the joint owners of that IP. Uh, Generally in such situations, even for example, we work for a lot of corporates. Whenever we are evaluating their patent portfolios, a lot of times they specifically tell us that, hey, do not look at patents that where we have joint ownerships, because that's a different problem statement altogether. They need to ensure that all the parties are on the same page before they actually even think of licensing or monetizing their patents.
Okay. And now another question coming in my mind, looking at all scenarios, that how one should evaluate the technology or patent, that whether it is up for monetization, yes or no. Because in India, as far as I know, I mean, situation is not so updated, right? I mean, everybody knows
Absolutely.
the value, and then not so much skilled people available. So what's your
Absolutely.
advice in here? I mean, any strategy or any organization or any specific points will be there around it?
Right. Good question. So yeah, I think as you've rightly mentioned, I mean, this culture of patents, it has been coming up now in India. I mean, especially the government has been bringing in a lot of policies to motivate people to file more and more patents. And I mean, generally it's the US and the European countries that are mainly known for filing patents. And in fact, companies have been generating billions in revenue purely from the licensing side of things, right? So generally the way one can approach, or rather, let's say if I have a patent, right? I'm here in India, I have a patent. How do I decide what path to take? Whether I can go for licensing, whether I should go for sales. Obviously, let's say I do not have the requisite resources to make a product out of it. Let's assume that situation. Now, the first step that typically must be undertaken is to get the infringement analysis performed for the invention, right? Now, uh, through infringement analysis, what essentially you're trying to see is that, for example, let's say I filed my patent 5 years back, right? In infringement analysis, what we essentially do is we try and see if there are any existing market players who are already using that technology without your consent, of course, right? So you're trying to identify those players, and let's say, hypothetically speaking, I have an invention, I get the infringement analysis conducted from some firm where, let's say, it could be Sagacious, or that there are several other firms here in India who basically provide the IP services. And again, infringement is one of the most prominent service lines that almost every company caters to. So as an outcome of the infringement analysis, what a patent owner is essentially trying to know is that if there are, let's say, 5 companies that already are making products using my invention, then I can straight away approach those companies and show them that, hey, you are already using my invention, and the fact that I have a patent for it, I want you to start paying me royalties for it and get into an agreement with me, for example, right? So that's the preferred first step that one must do, is get the infringement analysis conducted. And again, if, let's say, considering the same situation, if there are players out there who are using your invention, and let's say you do not again have the resources or the time to go and speak to each and every one of them, you may still want to take the patent licensing route, patent sales route. Now, the amount in this case that you will get for your patent, when it is proven infringement that is out there for your patent, would be a lot more that you would get if there's no infringement for your patent, right? So in US, typically, so we work with a lot of US based clients. So generally, if anyone wants to sell a patent, it might cost, let's say, $50,000 to buy a patent, right? But if that patent, let's say, has a proven infringement, let's say there are 10, 12, 15 players who are using that invention, then the value of that one patent can even go up to $1 million. So 20 times of what you usually get when you sell a patent, right? So yeah, so that's always the first step. And then accordingly, you can decide, even if let's say there's no infringement, there could still be ways, and you believe that, let's say you've patented an upcoming technology, which doesn't have a current market presence, but it is solving a problem that is out there in the market, right? Then you can position your pitch accordingly, right? Position your pitch accordingly in that case. So for example, you can create a pitch deck, which is also one of the things that Sagacious IP does, for example. In pitch deck, what we do is we elaborate what the invention is, what problems it's trying to solve. We identify the right kind of licensees for it, the right kind of companies who are facing that problem. We make a reach out to them, and we try and then persuade them that, hey guys, see, you're already facing this problem. Here's this IP. It's providing you a very viable solution, we believe, for this problem. So you must go ahead and license it. So yeah.
Okay, so essentially, basically, here the gist is that how you should proceed with patent monetization. Basically, the strategy is going around what is the applicability of a technology in general, right?
Absolutely.
In holistic manner, in what way, where, and when you can actually customize in the mainstream products, right? Whereas
Absolutely.
mass adoption will be there of your technology.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that will actually give you the valuation of your technology. So I'm sure the inventors basically are the core person, the main point, who can really, whenever they identify the demand, then they create, based on that problem, they create the solution, right? So
Right.
on that point, they usually knows, yes, my technology can achieve this thing, right? So
Right.
moving to next question, what are the risk or might be the issues and challenges around the monetization strategies?
Right. So again, some of the common risks that can happen when you are entering a patent licensing agreement, let's say with someone, is that, I mean, the first thing is the profitability, right? What I mean by that is, let's say if I were to make products by my own, being the patent owner, obviously when I sell it, I get to keep the entire revenue, right? But in case of licensing, as I mentioned earlier, there's only a certain percentage which you're getting out of the every product which is sold by the licensee, right? So obviously profitability is one thing that is a potential downside to it. I would not necessarily call it a risk, but yeah, it's an obvious downside if I want to, for example, go for a patent licensing route. Now, again, the next problem that can potentially be there is that when you are going ahead with patent licensing, right, it all boils down to how skilled the licensee is. Because again, the whole motive of why you're going for patent licensing is that you expect some other person, some other company to basically take your invention, convert it into a product, and sell that product so that you can make money out of it, right? Now, it all depends on the skill of that licensee. If the licensee is not skilled enough, let's say, then all of your efforts go down the drain. So that's the second potential downside or risk of monetizing the IP. And the third one, which is where we've seen some of our clients actually struggling, is not defining the appropriate licensing terms when getting to the discussions with the licensee. So here, so for example, if let's say in the licensing agreements, if it is not clearly defined how much royalty percentage you would get, or there are certain unnecessary clauses that are entered into those agreements, and you've not, let's say, as the licensor, if you have not read that agreement properly, and you are, let's say, hoping that, hey, 1 year down the line, I'll get this much money, for example. Now the licensee 1 year down the line may come back to you and say that, hey, this is not what we agreed on. This is what's written in the agreement. This is what will pay you, for example, right? So ensuring that all the requisite clauses are appropriately mentioned in the licensing agreement becomes very, very important, right? And you as a licensor, irrespective of who has drafted that agreement, as a licensor, it is your responsibility to ensure that you are reading all the terms carefully and ensuring that there's nothing you don't get obliged to do certain things down the line. It should be all up to the licensee, and you should just reap the benefits out of whatever product sales the licensing is going to make down the line. So yeah, so these are the three risks that we have generally witnessed associated with the patent monetization.
Absolutely. Even one of our audiences already asked question around it that what is the challenge? I mean, I'm sure they must have faced a challenge that the two parties have agreed on something, then things haven't gone the way they should be. Then
Yes.
how to move ahead? Then how to go forward without without hitting the plans of each other? So I'm sure you have already provided the answer that your all terms and agreements should be proper with all proper clauses, right?
Absolutely.
So whenever you're drafting, taking any NOCs with any of the particular parties,
Ankita, I think your screen froze. Can others hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I think her screen has frozen or she is out of the.
Okay, no worries. So we can probably wait for her to come back.
So, sir, if it's okay, can I ask you one question?
Yeah, please.
Very interesting. Yeah. I have this patent which is kind of bringing in the dent in probiotic industry, and I would like to know, how do you value these patents? Right? Which are the agencies that value these patents and patent valuation? Is there a method to this madness or method to follow? How do you value it?
Again, good question. Now, there are, so if you go to Google, you try and let's say Google the ways in which patent valuation is done by the various companies, you'll come up with various techniques. Some of the most prominent ones I will talk about, and I'll mainly talk about the one that we use at Sagacious. So there's this cost-based approach that a lot of companies use for patent valuation. What they do there in, so what comes as an input to the cost-based approach is that they take into consideration all the cost that has gone into bringing about that patent, which will include the R&D cost, the patent filing cost, the maintenance cost, etc., etc. They'll come up with certain other factors to essentially come up with the overall value that that patent should essentially have, right? It's a cost-based approach, not the approach that is very common, frankly, but I've seen some companies still using that approach. The other approach.
sorry, I'm back.
No worries, no worries. Ankita, so someone was asking about patent valuation, I mean, the various techniques. So I'll probably go ahead and respond to that. So yeah, so I talked about cost-based approach. The other approach that some of the companies follow is a market-based approach, where essentially what it's done is that they look at the past transactional data to understand what will be the overall value of this IP if someone wants to sell it, for example. Right now, there are a lot of I mean, credible agencies, credible analytics-related companies that keep on evaluating the yearly data, yearly IP data, to understand what the patent sales typically have been like. So, for example, one of the reports that that I generally sometimes refer to, which gives a lot of good insights on the US related data, is ROI, the report by ROI, right? So in that report, so they, for example, provide a lot of data about uh, how much a patent in the automotive industry, for example, has been transacted for in the past year. So that data can be looked at to basically forecast how much value can an IP potentially get if someone wants to sell that patent, right? Now, the third approach, which generally is the most prevalent and the one that we use here at Sagacious, is the income-based approach, right? We also call it the hybrid approach. Now, what we essentially do in that is, our intent is to identify the fair market value of the patent, which in other words is the amount of revenue which we believe that the patent would generate over its lifetime, right? So we take it, why we call it hybrid approach, we essentially take into consideration two factors here. One is the market. We take into consideration the market statistics, right? Here we will, for example, look at what's the market size like. So if let's say my invention is related to photovoltaic cells, so I look at the overall, what's the photovoltaic market like, what is its CAGR. I'll take into consideration things like adoption rate, what's the R&D cost that typically companies put into it, so on and so forth. So there are about 15-20 factors which we take into consideration to calculate the NPV, net present value of the patent, which is based on all these factors, right? So that's the first input that goes into this hybrid model, which is based on the market statistics, right? The study of the market. The other side is the IP side of it. What we do is we do a more of qualitative analysis of the patents, where we, for example, take into consideration whether are there any existing infringers, where in the developmental stage the IP is, right? Whether
Sir, you're on mute, sir. You're on mute.
Okay. So was I on mute right from the very beginning? Or were you able to listen to the cost-based approach and the
Yes, yes. For a while you have been muted. Please continue.
Okay. So yeah, so I was talking about the hybrid approach, which we follow here at Sagacious, where what I was saying was that we basically take into consideration two aspects. The first one involves the quantitative analysis, where we basically take into consideration the market statistics, right? We will look at the market size, the CAGR, the adoption rates, the geographical distribution. So for example, if my patent is in US, I would want to understand what's the market size specifically in the US, the R&D cost of the companies that are present in that related space, so on and so forth. So we basically calculate the NPV, which is the net present value of the patent based on all these factors. So which is the first input that goes into the hybrid model. So the other input that goes into the hybrid model is where we do the qualitative analysis of the patent itself, right? Where we will conduct the infringement analysis, right? And I already explained the importance of a patent having existing infringement to the overall output in terms of money that you can expect out of it, right? It can increase many folds if there's existing infringement. So we take into consideration whether there's existing infringement, what's the developmental stage of that IP, right? Likewise, there are at least 10-12 factors which we take into consideration to calculate the IP factor. And then we basically combine these two, the NPV that has come into from the market-based approach and the IP factor that we calculate basis the qualitative analysis of the IP. And we basically combine the two to arrive at the overall patent valuation.
Okay. Thanks, Annie. And I think one critical question after everything considered is that I'm sure many inventors or the senior bosses of big companies, I'm sure they come usually, here and then, and that for the dilemma that whether we should sell or whether we should license our patent, isn't it? I think usually generally is the case. So what's your experience around, because I'm sure you dealt with a lot of clients from different segments. Right. So what's your experience, especially in Indian scenario?
Right. So generally what we have seen is that it basically depends on the profile of the client. So if it's a corporate, we've seen that the corporates are generally inclined towards licensing because they want to keep a hold of their IP, and they have, again, let me take a step back. So one of the critical distinctions between the licensing and selling is that in licensing, the revenue or the money that you would get would be spread across the lifetime of the patent. So you wouldn't get everything in one go, right? So obviously the payment that you will get is staggered in that sense. In selling, obviously you will get the money lump sum in one go. I'm not saying that the money that you will get in one go would be equivalent to the cumulative that you would get if you were to license that. So I'm not saying that, but yeah, generally it depends on the appetite of the client. If they want the money in next 3 months, for example, for whatever reasons, then they're more inclined towards selling the IP, because even if let's say it's getting sold at lesser amount, they're still ready to settle for that, rather than waiting for years to let that money trickle in and get the finances or the money generated out of the IP. So again, if it's a corporate, generally we've seen that the corporates are inclined more towards the licensing side of things, right? Having said that, there are some corporates that do sell up, that are interested in selling their non-core patents. And with non-core, what I mean is that, let's say if the company is in the cloud domain and they have a patent, let's say related to augmented virtual reality, they themselves are not making any products out of it. It's an IP that they have, then they might very well be willing to sell it off if they're getting good amount for it, right? But yeah, usually in case of, let's say, startups, a lot of individual inventors do come to us. 90% in 90% of scenarios, we've seen that they are more inclined towards selling it. Mainly because, as I mentioned, it's the money, the mode of money, the mode in which you're getting paid in licensing versus selling.
Absolutely, and I'm sure the kind of technology, I mean, whether because usually big companies, they go for the technical landscaping in various geographies about technology and whether it can get adopted, right, with various stakeholders. So they have that kind of farsightedness and decision-making thing that yes,
Absolutely.
with the help of that, I mean, that useful business resource, I mean, that known as the patent documents or the patent analysis, I mean, technology landscaping reports, with the help of that, they can see, yes, I mean, if I'll invest this much amount of money in this particular geography, so might be later on I will get harvest more than that, might be 10 times
Absolutely.
more. That's
Absolutely.
the scenario. And might be the disruptive technologies as well, because a lot many times the disruptive technologies which actually changes the scenario completely, even that's from a small company, a startup, or from like in Israel, it happened for Intel, right? For the chip making, that thing that
Right.
Moore's law is not gonna follow by Intel, but now they're making millions of millions because they have that kind of disruptive technology. That they have
Absolutely.
proven to a big company, no, you are not the bosses. So here is a theory and how it should follow in practical, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
So I think our advice as an experts from both sides, it should be for our for research institutes or for the even independent innovators or the big I must say SMEs who wants to move up in the value chain nowadays, not just as an Indian scenario, but they are exploring other markets as well. So if they really want to move ahead, say they should be very open in thinking. They should be like, okay, if this technology is good enough for me and I can use this particular technology by just licensing or by just using some royalty things, different ways, so they should collaborate, they should use that particular technology in upgrading themselves. So I think that's how right now synergies are. One more question, I think that's in more general way, because one of the audience even asked. So I think I'm sure you think that's a very basic question, but I think it's very, very important question while in this scenario, especially when one should thinking about filing a patent. I know from the legal perspective and others, they usually say, okay, whenever you just idea, whenever you have done your test results and you are in a particular state, then you should file. But if you see from the practical aspects of an expert, what do you think from your experience when one should file the patent? At what stage, especially?
Again, that's a very, very interesting question. So generally, if let's say I get some idea today that hey, this is something that I'm going to get my patent filed for, right? Now, in the US, for example, there's a concept of provisional and non-provisional. Again, I'm not completely sure of the filing system in India, and so in India, I'm sure it's somewhat on the similar lines. But in US, for example, there's a concept of, if I want to claim an earliest priority date, because right time, when we talk about the right time of filing a patent, we essentially want to claim the earliest priority date, and everyone wants that to be as early as possible, right? So that's where the provisional applications come in. So in provisional application in the US, what really happens is that you do not need to be ready with the entire patent draft to file that application. Even if, let's say, high level claims are there and there's some supporting embodiments you have, you can go and file that provisional. I mean, that the whole concept of provisional is so that you do not have to wait to draft the complete application and conceptualize the entire idea to be able to file a patent, right? So, I mean, again, I would say that if a similar thing also exists in India, again, pardon me, I'm not actually aware about whether it's the concept of provisional actually is there in India or not, but if it's there, that's usually the right time, because in provisional, generally, as I mentioned in the US as well, you do not have to be ready with all the arsenal to be able to file a full-fledged patent application. Even if, let's say, the claims are ready and some of the other basic material is ready, that's enough for you to go and file a patent, because you ultimately want to seek the earliest priority date, and you get 1 year time frame in the US to file the non-provisional application, which should be a complete patent in a complete drafted form, having the abstract, summary, background, etc., right?
Yeah, in India also the same scenario for the provisional, but herein I want to add my 5 cents here. That especially for the research organization and others. So whenever you have conceived some idea and you are still in the stage of devising a strategy and building your POCs and adaptation of the technology. So until and unless you're not sure about the 3 patentability criteria, that is non-obviousness, usefulness, and novelty. Apart from that, whether it is really gonna be in market, yes or no. If you will really deduce that factor that yes, this technology is gonna in market surely, then you should say yes, I will file patent for this. Of course, provisional one first. Second step is that whether you have got enough funding or not, because right now we are not just in Indian market, but now we are living in global village, right? So a lot of global partners are coming in here. A lot of Indian companies are moving outside. So collaborative stages. So in this particular scenario, one should be seeking, okay, I'm not just going to stay in India, I'm not just going to file in India, but I should file abroad as well as other markets using the help of PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty. For that purpose, you should be confirmed with the funds you have, because I'm sure with the small businesses and with the SMEs, scenario is that their focus is that I have created one technology, but until unless I'm not sure about getting the return on investment on my technology, I will not fund this further. I will not go ahead in the second step. So in this scenario, especially in automobile technologies and others who have related manufacturing field or the ICT side, whereas in technology, the pharma side, of course, in that you have to with your consistent, and of course, because life actually, it's a very long period of gestation of creating the results, your pharmaceutical, whatever you are creating, whatever process product you are creating. So you should be sure about the proper results, because lot many things, I'm sure, in the way of taking NOCs from lot many other parties, lot of approvals in pharma sector. So I think patentability scenario when you should file is going to be different based on the technology, based on the adaptability of your technology, and based on the funds. And I think lot many people even will argue, because nowadays lot many technologies related to deep tech, or most probably on SaaS based scenario, a lot of app-based innovations are there. Even they're not going for patents, they're just going for the trademark or for the copyrights, and based using that kind of IP also, they're making money, they're monetizing it, right? So it's always, I think, as from the experts perspective, from the market perspective, our advice is that please consider all these different factors, all your business strategies, use all patent information resources judiciously. Even whenever you conceive the idea, you always go through the patent information resources known as the freely available patent databases from EPO, from USPTO, from WIPO, from Indian Patent Office. Please use that judiciously, because that's, I think, that's very important resources, which is actually available free of cost. No money will be involved in the same, right, Honey? And if you have any other thoughts about it, please share so. And if we are also open for our audience, if we already took the whatever questions are there, if you have more questions in place, please share right now. We have a few moments in here. Honey, over to you if you want to add in. Okay, there is a question. Can you please guide us the usability of design patents? How they should go for monetization of design patents?
And again, unfortunately, I do not have much experience in monetizing design patterns. So I frankly will not be in a, I'm not the right person to answer that. But I will certainly try and get an answer for that. Ankita, I'll share that answer with you. So, I mean, whosoever asked this question, you can probably get back to that person. But unfortunately, I'll not be able to respond to that. So again, the simple reason being that majority of the companies, I mean, 90 to 95% of the filings that happen usually is in the utility patent side of things. And that's where I have the experience in. But yeah, you have a very valid question. And Ankita, I'll just research around it. I'll get back to you with the answer. So you can relay that. Okay.
Definitely. But if you see from our overall experience because as in technology commercialization, I've been involved in past 13 years. So from that perspective, if I can say, whatever kind of technology, whether in terms of industrial patent design, patents or the designs or the utility patents. So of course, first it's industry applicability. What are your competitors? What are different jurisdictions? So that's gonna be I think the end answer for everything. So you have to always scan, like Hani has already mentioned, different risk involved in that audit of your technology, right? Or the validation, whatever you're doing. So scan all these pointers and you will get your answer. Of course, there is a general strategy for which is going to be applicable for everything. But again, what is the applicability and when at what point, with the help of what kind of stakeholders or the corporation, you will get return on investment in the design pattern? Because of course design is something which is going to be give you disruptive technology kind of feeling and the different perspective altogether on even in the, you can say, your image, your brand in that. So we are open for the questions. Please share your questions. We'll take that and we'll email to you all of your answers, and we'll publish even all these questions and answers in a FAQ format after 2-3 days of this session. Thank you very much. I think this is a very, very interesting and insightful session. A lot of interactive exchange on various different pointers, because nowadays in generic webinars, we just share overall strategy, but here there are the actual key points, key critical points, how you should go, when you should go, and what kind of strategies you should devise around it. So thank you very much, Hani, for your time and discussing various aspects on patent monetization, and to our patient audience as well, and for our organizers. And thank you very much. Look forward for next session, which is going on the next Thursday. So thank you very much, and stay tuned with us for more information. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ankita. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.